Well, Matt, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Oh, thank you for having me. This is an
Yeah,
honor.
it was so much fun being on your podcast. What's the name of your podcast?
My podcast is the Sober Friends
The Sober
podcast.
Friends.
Yeah, you're a little more risque in my podcast. I went and listened to a bunch of your episodes, and I'm like, this woman, she's so nice. She's like pure and prudish. And then I heard you like trying to dig into guys with like blue jeans and stuff. I'm like, whoa, this
No.
is
And it was so funny. I saw how you framed what I said, and it's so funny what I say and what people hear is sometimes very different. And yeah, I always say if it was in a
when I
bottle,
heard that
a bag,
bottles, bags, and blue jeans, I'm like, okay, got my
okay.
title here.
I tell people, don't let my soccer mom exterior fool you.
No, I made a mistake. I judged a book by its cover, and there's a little underneath that onion when you peel back.
You know what? I got to tell you a quick little story. When my son was just a baby, I think maybe I had two already, but anyway, I remember being at our house. We had a painter come to the house, and we were out front discussing something. I had a baby on my hip, and we were talking, and he said a curse word in front of me. I think he said fuck or something like that. And then he like caught himself and he goes, oh, I'm so sorry. I hope I didn't offend you. And I like turned around to see who he was talking to. I was like, what are you talking? I was like, oh, that's when I saw it for the first time, that the way people see me and the way I see myself can be two very different things. So funny.
Yeah. I look at your album art and I see this is a very polite, prim and proper professional woman. And I would feel that way if I dropped an F-bomb. I would need to apologize because I'm not being a gentleman. But I'm assuming way too much.
Yeah.
I feel like you would make me blush. It wouldn't be the other way around.
That is not an uncommon experience in my world where I make people blush because they think people don't expect me. I remember one time a girlfriend and I were joking around about, this is going to be so bad. I hope you're not religious. We were joking around about Jesus. And I was like, he must have a huge penis because that's why all the, if he truly is the son of God. I mean, what a waste, but what do I know? I don't know. It's a whole thing.
According to some quarters, Mary Magdalene might have an answer to that, but it depends on what you believe.
And can we talk about the last years? Probably not. I don't know. No. Anyway, it's a thing. But yeah, that's anyway, you're hilarious. Thank you for sharing your perspective of me, my image. I've tainted my own image.
It was awesome. I enjoyed, because I edit everything. And I went back and I'm editing, and sometimes I hear like, oh, it's a good podcast. And then I listen, oh, this is not as good. And sometimes I go back and I'm like, oh, this is better than I remembered. And it was going through, I'm like, this is so good. This is so good. I can't wait to share this.
Well, it was so fun to be with you and the guys and talking about recovery and all the things. I just, I love talking about it, which is why I do the podcast, right? Love talking about
this whole doing podcasting has been a kick in the ass to my recovery. I feel more engaged, and I was getting bored at meetings.
Oh yeah.
And I wasn't hearing, and I'm going through the motions. And when you do a podcast and you go to meetings now become prep.
Yeah. It's
now
fodder.
It becomes a purpose.
Yes. Fodder for material for your podcast. Boredom at meetings, it feeds into the complacency. We go to meetings and we hear the same things over and over again. But the idea is that we have a quick forgetter. You hear that a lot at meetings too,
Absolutely.
Right? We have a quick forgetter, but the truth of the matter is it's good to review the information on a regular basis, the information that helps keep you sober. It's like positive brainwashing. This guy, when I first started a long time ago, before I got sober, actually right when I got sober, I was going to meetings and he goes, I think those people are brainwashing you. And I was like, yeah, totally. That's the whole point. My brain needed some washing. So he meant it as an insult. I took it as a compliment. So here we are.
I allowed the people I admired to brainwash me. And I took a little bit from them because they were sober. Somehow they got through not just the week and got through a weekend. They're telling me 35 years. How the hell did you not only get past the weekend, but through New Year's and Christmas and family holiday and get to 35 years? You must know something I don't. I'm just going to do what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, that's good. That sounds like you're all about taking action, and I think it's so easy to just consume information and then you feel, oh, I have, you feel good because you hear something that's makes you feel inspired or engaged or whatever, then you don't change your behavior. I'm a total self-help junkie. I love, if I sit through some kind of informational training thing and I go, oh, it feels so good. I could do all this stuff. And then when it comes to taking action, that's a whole another ball game.
I'm an obsession junkie. So part of my alcoholism can shift to an obsession about something, be it gardening or the lawn or AA, that it was so painful to go to my first meeting and first few and meet new people that I didn't want to have that discomfort again. So I might as well jump in. And if I'm going to jump in, I'm going to learn everything there is to know about this and master it. Now, the problem with me is when I get close to mastery, then I lose interest.
Then you get bored. Yeah.
And I get bored.
Yeah. Then you got to take it to the next level and start a podcast.
Yeah. It bailed my ass out. I did a podcast doing something totally different. That ended. It ended not great. And I had all of this equipment and I'm like, well, what the hell do I do now? Well, I had a recovery podcast in mind and I'm thinking this will be easy. I'm in recovery. I don't think there's too many recovery podcasts out there. They must be, I bet they're all awful. This is going to be lickety split. And then I started digging in and there are like hundreds out there.
Yeah, so many.
And there are there are great ones out there. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm never going to make it. And it's just that I remember you interviewed Jean McCarthy from the Bubble Hour.
Yeah.
And I always looked at the Bubble Hour as like, wow, she's always at the top of the ratings. I'd never get past there. And then she up and ended her podcast.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So in a
she
sense,
did it for
like,
10 years. That's a long time. That's a long run.
And that was a gold standard podcast. I mean, that was always on top of the charts, no matter what.
And I love Jean, and she and I chatted after. I interviewed her twice and I interviewed her, and afterwards we had a conversation. I told her, I have a very hard time letting people just tell their stories. I have so many questions. I want to know, I want to get into the details and, very pragmatic and practical. I want to know all the ins and outs of the house, right? People used to say, oh, all you have to do is do the work. And I was like, what does that mean specifically? Like what, I needed to know all the things. And so when I interview people and they share things about their story, I have questions and I'm an interrupter, and it's just my style. A lot of people don't like it, but there's lots of other podcasts, but I do toy with the idea. Maybe we should do it today. You can just tell your story and I'll let you run it, and I'll try not to interrupt you. No,
interrupt me when you got to keep me in line. That's fine.
Well, I asked her and I wonder how you handle this. It's like when you get people that are like runaway, they get too lost in their story. I asked Jean, I said, what do you do? She goes, I just let them say what they need to say because it feels important for them to share whatever it is they're sharing. And then I edit it later. And I was like, wow,
I just get the impression from her that it's all empathy with Jean. She just seems like so nice and so nice to the point.
Well, she's Canadian.
That's right. I'm like, are you for real that you're this kind and nice?
She is. Yeah, she is a kind, genuine, authentic soul. But she's going to leave her catalog up though. She's got like 300 interviews. So she's going to leave up her. Yeah, she gets like 60 or 70,000 downloads a month.
Christ.
I know, so
I just bang my head in the microphone. I'm like, oh my God, take the decimal point and move over one. That's where I am.
It takes time. It takes a long time.
It does.
But hey, I want to run you through my lightning round question thing because
I'm so excited. I've heard this.
Yes. Are you all prepared? You're probably all prepared. I mean,
I forgot what the questions you asked, but I'm like, I get to be on the lightning round. This is great.
You're so cute. Okay, here we go.
Yep.
Do you have a favorite recovery book that helped you when you first got sober?
So I got two questions. You're saying when you first got sober, so living sober was definitely it.
Okay.
I just ate living sober up, chewed it out, breathed it because I could absorb it at that time. And it is something I recommend to everybody who's newly sober, because in every page is something that you can do that's going to help you, even if it's just don't drink for the next 5 pages. I'll say now it's writing the big book. So that's one of those things that if you drop on your foot, you're going to break it.
You were the one that called it the tome.
It is a tome. It is wonderful. And I'm going to do something with it. I've got a project in mind that I need to read this book for.
What is it?
So I haven't told my boys this, so I'll tell you.
Okay. An exclusive.
Howard, I know it's preface. I'm stealing this idea from Howard L., who does AA recovery interviews. And he did a separate podcast where he just read the big book, but it's mostly him reading. Wow. I want to read this book and get a whole detail of why each chapter is what it is. I'm going to do the reading of the whole big book by chapter. And then up front, if my guys want to do it, have like this quick discussion of this is what the chapter is about. Here's the history. Here's what you might know. Here's what it means to us. Here's what reality is. And kind of give that cliff notes of this is what you're about to hear, and then read it. So you can take the book on the go with you with some context.
Oh, brilliant. I'm all about context and perspective.
You read this book and man, you start hearing, all right, it's not exactly what the old timers say it's supposed to be. And Bill was a salesman, and he was selling his story and he was selling his book. He played fast and loose with some of the facts. And it's fascinating to find that out.
Yeah, he also did acid before he wrote the 12 and 12.
I don't think I knew that, but I'm not surprised.
Not surprised. Love me some Bill. Those are great books. I might have to dig into writing the big book. I might have to check that out.
Yeah, don't get intimidated. Just do a few pages a night.
Okay. That's a good suggestion. Thank you for sharing those. I think that's important to know which books are good to read. And my listeners are avid readers, so that's fun. Do you have a go-to mantra or quote that you live by?
Contempt before investigation. I don't have the whole thing, but I get fixated on that from Herbert Spencer. And I use that as my mantra, and it keeps me having an open mind. There's a lot I do in my job where my company is very focused on having a growth mindset and being respectful of other perspectives. Almost, I wouldn't say to an extreme, but we're very open-minded. And we did this growth mindset training, which was supposed to be about racial diversity. But if you read it, it's, no, you can apply this to everything. If you have and we're human beings, so we're not perfect. So sometimes we have a closed mindset that if you win, I lose. No, keep an open mind, be empathetic to somebody else's point of view. You might learn something, then both of you might win.
Oh, be curious. Yeah. Is the mindset, I forgot what is that, the Carol DeWitt mindset?
I don't know. I don't remember. I'm sure it's something some consultant put together for them. Some firm that my company purchased the training from. Yeah. But they're all rebranded of other things.
Yeah, growth mindset is so important. I think when we get into recovery, if you've been beaten down enough, you're just like, okay, fine, I surrender. Tell me what I need to do. That's kind of how it was for me. Is that how it was for you too?
Yes,
absolutely. Mindset. Yeah, that's awesome. That's a really good quote, by the way. Contempt prior to investigation is kind of how I heard it. Good one. Good to be open-minded. Do you have a regular self-care recovery routine? And you can include things like how many meetings you go to, or if you have a morning practice, anything along those lines.
I could go to more meetings.
Well, let's talk about what you actually do.
I have a home group.
I'm just kidding.
My Monday night big book meeting, I do not miss. I had to miss 2 weeks before this one for family things. And I don't think I'd missed that meeting since before the pandemic started. I just go to every meeting. Being involved and being helpful is part of self-care. So I'm big into service. I just stepped down as the district treasurer. I was like on year 4 of my 2-year commitment.
Why is it that the treasurers always get hung up on that? Nobody wants to do it.
It was something I loved doing. So because we were in a holding pattern, I hung on. I didn't think it was fair. Once we started in person, I'm like, as much as I enjoy this, I know why. I'm remembering why I wanted to give it up. The treasurer of my group got sick and he couldn't do it anymore. And I looked at that and I'm like, that's it. It's time for me to get service on a different level. I'm going to take this. I'm going to give up my district treasurer's job, even though I love it, because it's time. And I eventually gave it up, and I'm glad it was like, this is the right thing to do. So doing those things is helpful to me. Right. Walking my dogs. Oh my God, that is meditation for me, especially when I have time by myself.
Amen. You got 3 kids. I bet your alone time is just getting out of the house. And
I mean, there are times that my wife and I are getting ready to go to sleep, and my son will just barge in at any time. Oh, guys, I have this shirt here. Does this go with these pants? Like at 11 at night, you need to ask me that, and you need to barge into our room.
No boundaries.
No boundaries. So gardening, listening. I'm so passionate about podcasts, both recovery ones and ones that have no redeeming social value, and everywhere in between.
That's awesome. Podcasts are good. Feed your brain, right?
Yes.
I mean, obviously, I'm going to say podcasts are good. Yeah, it's important to balance service with self-care. Do you do prayer and meditation? Is that part of your self-care?
I pray when I can. I struggle with meditation because I get myself outside of my own head. Okay, I can meditate, but this is going to take time, and I don't have time, so I'm just not going to do it. Yeah. As opposed to saying, I need to sit and do it. Now, I pray and meditate when my ass is on fire. Good. That's when we all do it. The thing that's kept me praying a little bit is I'm also good with in the morning saying, good morning, God.
Okay.
And saying that's a prayer, because sometimes it's like, I can only say, good morning, God. God, help me just get through the day. Yeah. As opposed to doing nothing.
Do you know the prayer that never fails?
What's that?
Thy will be done.
Yeah. See, here's my prayer thing. The these, those, and thous I struggle with. Like, I did not do my 3rd step by reading, God take thy, thee. I just sat down with a bunch of guys and said, I want to do my 3rd step. And I'm just letting you know, God, I'm willing to give myself over to you. I'm willing to put everything into this. I'm willing for you to do with me, to do better things than I was doing with myself. And to me, I had to say it that way.
Yeah, it says it in the book. You're either here's one. If you want to say a prayer, if you don't know what to say, you can say this or say whatever you want to say.
When I start seeing the thou, thy, it takes me out. And I'm reading text. I'm not making a connection with a higher power.
Well, there it is. You have to make the connection.
Right.
How about your will be done?
My will gets me to bad places.
No, I mean, say your will instead of.
Oh, yeah. Your will be done.
Your will be done.
God, just let me do what you want me to do.
Could you get this? That would be awesome. Thanks.
Yes.
Could you handle this, please?
Help me. God, help me help you today.
Just like the Jerry Maguire. Help me. Help you.
Well, that's my day every day with the people I work with. So
I felt like that way in sales.
Yeah.
Help me, help you. Actually, in coaching too, sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a whole nother story. What's one thing you wish you knew when you first got sober?
AA meetings are fun. I always thought that they were a bunch of guys in trench coats and long beards who were homeless with an incandescent light bulb swinging around where all hope is lost. And then I went into the first meeting I connected with, and people were loud. Yeah. And they were laughing, and the lights were bright, and I'm like, well, I must be in the wrong place.
Oh yeah.
This must be, I don't know. This must be a church meeting of some. No, these were just guys.
Am I in the right room?
And going out with people socially, they're louder than what I'm normally used to.
We are a group of people who insist on having a good time.
Yeah. And killing every bottle of Pellegrino in the restaurant.
Let me ask you something, because I have heard complaints many times from the broader recovery community, like just the alcohol-free, like non-AA community, that meetings are depressing. And I was at a meeting this morning, actually.
Go to another meeting.
Well, I think sometimes it just depends, right? Like the meeting I was at this morning was super heavy. People were sharing about some really heavy stuff, and that's appropriate. And I don't walk away from those meetings feeling depressed, but I know some people get triggered by that. In my mind, it's like, oh, they're processing this stuff and we feel connected at the heart level. Like I just hold space for people. I don't know why I take it differently. How do you feel when you go to it? Like you go to meetings where there are moments of real
Mhm.
heaviness. How do you process that?
I process thinking that this could be me, that I'm going to be real present when I hear this. Although I'm not living with that heaviness,
Uh-huh.
it's not my life. If I hear it, I dial in and say, pay attention. What they're going through, if you don't keep your act on the straight and narrow, this could be you. So learn from this. I also look at it as this is an opportunity for me to share empathy, get out of my comfort zone and
Yeah.
walk over to that person, give them a hug.
Yeah. Or just hold space and listen.
Yes.
Sometimes just showing up to meetings is an act of service. Just holding space for somebody
Yeah.
to be able to, release some of that sadness that they're holding.
This is another place I'm fascinated with is the people who are not the AA people who have found recovery in other ways. And I'm generally curious about what are you doing? How is it working?
Yeah.
And I'm not one to judge. If this is working for you, that's great. I want to know a little bit about it.
Yeah, I get super curious too. Well, you know me, I honor all forms of recovery, but as an
Mm-hmm.
old timer in 12 step, I hear things and I feel alarmed sometimes, and I have to stop and question, what is it that's really scaring me? Is it questioning, ideas that I've been sort of, like you'll hear a lot of non AA people sharing their stories and then get a lot of criticism from people in AA because there's this mindset that AA is the only way.
There's
I
some people who say AA is the only way.
I know they just come right out and say it.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is factually not even true.
No, I
It's
look
not
at
true.
AA as the gold standard. Before AA, there really was nothing. It's the gold standard. I feel pretty good. If you do what you're supposed to do in AA, you got a good shot. Doesn't mean it's going to work for everybody. And if you've got something that's working for you, awesome.
Yeah, I'm
But
actually
I'm not going
writing
to
a
point my finger.
yeah, I'm actually writing a survival guide because for women, there's a lot of predatory behavior that happens in
Hell
AA.
yeah.
So women need to be very careful. The court system is often sending people who don't really belong there, right? But, like when I first got sober, women were not, I didn't have good relationships with women. And so I wanted to go to mixed meetings. But there was a lot of women that pulled me. I was 25 years old. I was blonde at the time. And they were like, there's a lot of wolves in sheep's clothing here. You need to be careful. So I was put on notice pretty early on and behaved accordingly.
Yeah, if you're a 25-year-old woman who's newly sober, if you can find a gender only meeting, you are doing yourself a great service. And you know what? If you're a 25-year-old male, you're doing a great service. Go to men's meetings and just
Yeah.
get that distraction out of the way.
Yeah. Same sex meetings are really good. And I always encourage women to go to women's meetings. But my experience was that I did not relate to the women in the beginning. It took me a minute. Took me a minute to appreciate women's meetings, but I went to mixed meetings with pretty severe, not severe boundaries, but pretty solid boundaries.
Got it.
Like there were some guys that would hug me and then bend backwards to lift me off my feet. That shit's
Oh,
not, yeah, that's fucked up. That is not cool. I would be like, never hugging them again.
yeah.
That kind of thing. So you
Yeah.
got
The
to be
guys
careful.
downstairs areas are like it just, it is evil, man. It does men do bad
Poison.
things.
It's poison.
Yep.
Okay, I digress. What do you do for fun these days? I know you like doing service and podcasting. What
A
else is
lot of
fun for you?
gardening.
Oh, gardening.
Um, I like the podcasting stuff, but I also like understanding podcasting.
Uh-huh.
So, but right now it's gardening, it's doing stuff with the kids. With 3 kids,
Yeah,
my
you have
fun is
three.
seeing it through them, taking them
Yes,
places.
playing with kids. You have a 14-year-old boy, a
Yep.
nine-year-old girl, and an 8-year-old girl. So you got a busy household.
Yep. Very different personalities, all three. All of them have different talents. So my 9-year-old has pretty severe dyslexia.
Oh,
and she gets a lot of special help. She's the most empathetic person I've ever seen in my life, the nicest person I've ever seen in my life.
Aww.
And she works her ass off to overcome the difficulties. She's at a point where her 8-year-old sister can outread her, that she struggles to read, and her sister can read all the billboards, all the signs, all the stores. And she sees that and sees that that's not how it should be. And it breaks my heart.
Yeah.
And then I see that the other side of her brain, where the artistic side is in overdrive. And she is so artistically talented with like makeup and design. And so they're all different, but they're all incredibly smart in their own way. And they drive our lives.
Yeah.
3 young kids. I'm following behind.
That. Yeah. We had a child-centered household as well. And yeah, it goes by fast though. Mine are 21 and 18. And yeah, it's sad. I was like, wow, it's kind of over. It's
I don't want to think about that.
Yeah, we'll move past that. Well, I really do want to hear your story, and I always feel like it's helpful to start at the beginning. Like, I'd like to know what your family of origin was like, and how old you were when you started using, and why you think you started.
Yeah, I qualify for adult children of alcoholics as well, and didn't know this was a thing until my therapist told me. I read the book. I read parts of the book and had to put it down because it was too painful. My growing up was very painful. I've heard other people on other podcasts talking, I wouldn't change it for the world. I look at that, I'm like, I would not want to have gone through what I went through, and it's painful to look back. So my father was an alcoholic. He beat my mom. She divorced him when I was very young, and we lived in poverty. I remember going to the window at Sears in West Springfield, Massachusetts, to get food stamps. So we were on food stamps. I was an only child, no brothers and sisters, just my mom, living on the second floor of a 2-family house of my uncle. I always felt different. I always felt different than everybody else, and I stuck out like a sore thumb. There were some issues within my mother's family of origin where she was sort of the redheaded stepchild, and that got transitioned to me. When I would go over my aunt's house, my uncle would always greet me with, "There's the hemorrhoid." That was his nickname for me.
What a dick.
Yeah, he was a dick. Very often in family gatherings, I would get my arm burnt by cigarettes, by accidentally on purpose for fun.
Oh my God.
So I was always felt like an outcast, even in my family. We finally my mom moved us out of West Springfield, which would not have given me the greatest education, to another town, which had a very good education. But I was even more of a misfit because it was a wealthy town and I was dirt poor. And I just didn't feel accepted by anyone. I remember I had a friend who wanted to get involved in drugs, like pot and stuff. And I was not into that, but we talked about getting rubber cement to smell. And I remember feeling like that's a good idea. I'd never done drugs before, but it felt like that was a good idea to go get rubber cement to smell and get high off of. So I'm pretty 12, 13.
Okay. 12, 13, huffing. Got it.
Yeah, I never did it. But
you didn't do it?
No, I didn't do it.
Oh.
But I wanted to.
Yeah.
It just never had the means.
Oh.
I found out after that my father was an alcoholic. And at that moment, I probably like anywhere between 10 and 12. And I decided I was never going to drink because I knew the facts that I got about a 90% chance of being an alcoholic. If he's an alcoholic, I'm never going to drink. And that guided my drinking career of always just getting up to a point so I wouldn't become like my father. I started drinking, I think at 16. I was angry at my mother for something, and I decided to throw my money in. We're going to go find the homeless guy to go into Springfield and get us 40s or whatever we could get. I think I drank a 40 at Budweiser was the first thing I drank. I don't know if I felt drunk. I couldn't find the feeling, and I didn't like the taste. And it took a little while, but I finally found it was like jiggling into that stuck lock. And once you find the groove, you've got it every time. And I remember early on in my teens of seeing one beer bottle somewhere and thinking, why the hell would somebody drink one beer? What does that do for you? So I was an alcoholic. Now, I didn't drink all the time because I couldn't get my hands on it. But once I had my first buzz, it's all I thought of. Even if it was months between drinking, I was obsessing about it and could not wait. When I went to college in Westchester County, New York. And at the time, this is early 90s, 93 to 97. And at that time, if you had a school ID, you could get into the bars. There really weren't house parties. You go to the bars. That's not the case now because, of course, if you allow underage kids in to drink, they're going to end up getting killed. So one by one, all these bars closed down. At the time, I could get into them, and that's where we drank. I went into a fraternity because I wanted to feel accepted. I wanted to find a girl. I had to go out to be accepted. And I ended up, when I was pledging a fraternity, getting alcohol poisoning. Woke up in New Rochelle Hospital, not knowing how I got there, but I was pretty sure. I had an idea when I looked down and I saw an IV in, and it could have died. And instead, the notoriety I got from that was like, wow, I'm a celebrity. I'm the kid who went to the hospital. Instead of looking at that and saying, oh my God, this is bad. But I always focused on the drinking up to a certain point. And even though I remember thinking I have a low tolerance, and I asked a friend, how do I build up my tolerance? And he said, we got to drink, even if you just drink one beer, just drink every single day a little bit, and that will help you build up your tolerance. What a backward ass way of thinking.
Great advice.
Yeah, I'm getting drunk too easily. How do I push through and power through this to really get to a place where I'm a powerhouse here?
How do I spend more money to achieve the same result?
So this alcoholism thing is such a mental thing in so many ways that I have these behaviors, but because I'm doing this in college, I'm not an alcoholic. I ended up living on my own. I was very poor living on my own after college. I worked in broadcasting at the fringes and did not make that much money. Around this time, I started drinking by myself and was all focused on how much can I drink, and can I have one beer? Can I have two beers? Can I stop? Am I doing the wrong thing by drinking by myself? What happens if I drink too much when I'm at home? Should I only drink beer? And I ended up getting into wine. This was another obsession I had, wine. I was a wine Spectator subscriber. You can't have a drinking problem if you subscribe to Wine Spectator, because you're learning about all different types of wines and why a screw top is better technology than a cork. And if I know that there are different crystal glasses by Riedel, which are for Cabernet and for Merlot and for Pinot Noir, well, the drunks drink Bud Light or Coors Light or Schlitz, but I'm drinking good wines. And I go in the Wine Spectator and look through the best values. And I know there's cheap wines to buy that have a good flavor. It doesn't matter that I would drink a whole bottle by myself. It just matters that I'm a wine connoisseur, and that's why I'm doing this.
Right.
So I'm skipping through a lot of this story because I didn't get fired from jobs, and nobody told me to stop drinking.
Yeah, me either.
But in my mind, I was a mess. If there was alcohol present, do I drink? Can I drink? Should I drink? Am I going to be able to have one? I'm going to really want to get drunk, but if I do, I'll make a fool of myself, so maybe I shouldn't. So it really was a case of I didn't enjoy it if I could control it, but if I didn't control it, then I couldn't. No, let me back up. If I enjoyed it, I was not controlling it.
Right.
And there were those times that I could not control it.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of friends who didn't drink that much. And I just felt like my friends who didn't drink that much were not fun. I'd love to have people who drank like I did. But there was this mental thing going on in my head around how much can I drink? Can I just drink one? If I can just drink one, I don't have a problem. I was taking alcoholic quizzes online, and I tried everything to pass them, and I would always fail them. Wow. So in my mind, well, the way today's society is, anybody who has one drink once a month is an alcoholic. So I'd push it away. And then I found out later, nobody who doesn't have a drinking problem takes online tests about alcoholism. That was my problem right there. I thought about problems subconsciously for years and years and years. And I went through a period of time where I went 10 months dry, didn't go to meetings. I just stopped drinking. And then a girlfriend broke up with me and I started drinking again. I was watching this show called Switched at Birth on ABC Family. And one of the main characters was a recovering alcoholic. And in one scene, she has a relapse. She's given a glass of wine. You could see on her face, I'm taking this, I shouldn't do it. And then the alcohol hits her mouth and you see her face change. And I saw that and I said, that's me. I'm an alcoholic. That's me. And at that moment, it felt like my body was on fire. At that moment, I wanted nothing more than to drink, yet I knew I couldn't. And at that moment, I looked and said, I'm an alcoholic. I have an alcohol problem. And the thing that is least important about me quitting alcohol is stopping drinking. Everything has to change right there. And that was very, very scary, but I was motivated in that moment of something has to change. And I was afraid to talk to my therapist about it because I didn't want to hear him say, yeah, I think you do have a problem. But I was also afraid of him saying, I think you're being silly. So he told me something else. Well, I don't know. Why don't you go to a few meetings and see what happens? See what you relate to. And then I had to tell my wife, I think I have a problem because she's never talked to me about it. And I don't know how I'm going to have this conversation that I'm going to have to go to meetings. And I even thought of, I would just tell her I'm going to do something else and lie and go to meetings. Imagine that. Like, are you having an affair or something? No, I'm going to AA meetings and I didn't want to tell you.
That's not as uncommon as you might think, actually.
Oh, I'd imagine so.
Yeah.
Because that was a hard conversation. And she turned to me and she goes, I don't blame you. I think you didn't have a chance because my father was an alcoholic.
Aww.
My mother drank in a way that was not healthy. My stepfather's an alcoholic. So there was abuse and there was words thrown my way in the home. The home wasn't safe. There was no shelter for me in the home, out of the home. I look back at childhood and I'm like, I feel like I survived like 18 years of prison.
It sounds like a nightmare.
I survived.
Yeah.
It was a nightmare.
Yeah. I sometimes hear stories and I just wonder to myself, how did you survive? A lot of people don't, and sometimes the drugs and alcohol is the thing that saves you. And then later, your savior becomes your executioner kind of a thing.
This is tough to, no, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Such an interrupter. So it was the therapist saying, well, I don't know, go test it out for yourself. So did you go to meetings?
Yes,
you started going to meetings?
Started going to meetings. He said I was an alcoholic at the first meeting. I went to a beginner's meeting because I had this idea that meetings were structured in such a way and there was this progression and you graduated. So you go to a beginner's meeting and they teach you how to do this. And that's not what it was at all. No. And I found the beginner's meeting was not right for me because it was all around sober houses. And this was really low bottom stuff.
Okay.
And I could not relate to this. This was rough. This was closest to my vision of what an AA meeting was.
Yeah.
And like, this is not for me, but it's where I got my big book.
Okay.
I found some meetings closer to me, some men's meetings with a lot of sobriety, and that's where I felt at home.
Okay.
There was a guy who was a firefighter at the time. He was close to 35 years sober. And he said, I could have one beer. I could have two beers. I didn't drink every day, but I was miserable when I did. And I'm like, that's me. This is where I belong.
Wow.
And I heard that story and I kept going to that meeting. Like, that is what I went right up to him and I'm like, you are my story. I finally heard somebody who drank the way I did, who had the feelings like I did.
Wow.
Because I was thinking it's just guys with a bottle and a paper bag. That wasn't me.
Yeah. It's so interesting. The preconceptions that people have, about what it is. And then they actually go and then they're like, whoa, this is nothing what I thought it was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They told me I was full of crap at first after I had some time because I said I was getting sober for my kids so they didn't have to see this. And they're like, Don't say that. Say you want to get sober because you want to get sober. Forget about the family. Don't do it because of the family. And I had a hard time getting through that for a while.
And I mean, why not? I hear that people are like, oh, you can't get sober for anyone else. I don't know. Maybe you can.
I understand the point that if you're just doing it for them, you're not bought in.
Well, if you're just doing it for that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And in the end, it wasn't just, I was doing it for them, but I was doing it for me to give them a better example.
Yeah.
So I wasn't just doing it for them.
Yeah. So did that guy become your sponsor, or
He did not, but he was my great grand sponsor.
Okay.
So at this meeting, if you cut the meeting in half, one old timer sponsored all the guys on the right side of the room. This guy sponsored all the people on the left side of the room, or you were in his tree. So you were in one or two trees.
This is a men's meeting.
This was a men's meeting.
Got it. Okay.
So he didn't sponsor me, but
you were like in his lineage kind of thing.
But literally, you cut the room in half, and it's either this guy or this guy you work your way back towards. And it was like, and it was the same type of sobriety depending on what tree you went. It was different on each side of the room, and it reflected these two old timers.
So funny. Yeah. And the ironic thing is that there really is no one way to do it. I've talked to people that live on one coast or people that live on a different coast, and people take the steps differently. Meetings are run differently. Wherever you go, the meetings are different, how they're run. It's just amazing. And here's a differentiator. Meetings are not the program.
Right. I agree.
Taking the steps is the program.
So this is how I look at meetings. I think meetings are very important.
Yeah.
To me, meetings are how you describe how you're doing the program. And it's that communication of how I'm doing this. Then you work the program with your sponsor and through the book outside of the meetings.
Yes.
Kind of like church. There's some churches that say, you are all the ministers and the ministry starts when you leave the church. That's how I look at recovery. Your ministry and your program starts when you're not in the meeting.
Although the meetings are a good place to practice a lot of the stuff.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, here, we're required to speak the solution, right? Or share how we feel. So we start practicing, we start sharing. It's a great place for service. As long as you have the right boundaries,
That's important.
It's a great place to practice. And then we take what we learn and practice outside of the rooms. Right. So yeah, listen, I love it. I know you do too. There's not all people feel the same, but I know that not all meetings are created equal. You had to go to a couple meetings before you found your place. That's not uncommon.
I'm very lucky that in the area I'm in, there are meetings everywhere at all different times. If you're not finding a meeting, you're probably not willing to get in your car or ask somebody to drive you somewhere. That's not the case everywhere, but around me, if you're saying I can't find a meeting, you're not really trying.
Well, we are, and it depends on where you live. I remember talking to a gal that used to have to drive an hour once a week to get to a meeting. She lived out in the middle of nowhere, and it took her an hour to get to the meeting. And she had these little kids, so it would take her an hour to get there, spend an hour at the meeting, and so we're talking a 3-hour chunk. I mean, but she was willing to do it, but she was only able, and that was her only option. But I wonder how you feel about now. We're living in the post-COVID era where there are countless Zoom meetings. Do you have a strong feeling either way, whether you should go to in person or on Zoom, or maybe you think Zoom is okay?
I have incredibly strong opinions, and I butt heads with people on this one. I think both are great. I think that I hope Zoom does not go away.
It won't.
And I know of meetings where there are people who got sober only on Zoom and have only found recovery with Zoom being the reality, and they have great recovery.
Yeah.
I think there's a place for in-person meetings. There's a place for Zoom. I am more of an introvert. People scare the hell out of me. So Zoom is wonderful. I work from home now. I see the extroverts at work who were the rock stars who are lost and working from home. I'm a rock star. I know how to navigate this.
I've been prepping for this my whole life.
Yeah, I've been prepping for this my whole life. Now it's my time.
Your time to shine.
So I love that Zoom makes meetings more available.
Yeah.
There's no excuse now. If there is a Thursday meeting I go to where it is people from all over the country, and it's open to anybody willing to work a 12-step program. So there's AlAnon, there's OA, there's Cocaine Anonymous.
Okay.
And what I find is when the AlAnon people speak, I kind of tune out that they're AlAnon, and the story speaks to me. It doesn't matter.
I thought you were saying you tune them out.
No, I tune out. I kind of forget it's AlAnon.
Yeah.
And then I just hear the story and it's like, this still relates to me. It doesn't matter what the drug is, whether it's people, a narcotic, or alcohol. The story speaks to me.
Yeah, I get that. I always say that it doesn't matter what the problem is. The solution is the same. It's spiritual,
Absolutely.
It's simple, and it has nothing to do with the problem. Although it is nice to hear people talk about your flavor of obsession. But in my mind, the purpose of obsession is distraction from the pain. But it is nice to hear people talk about your flavor of crazy sometimes.
Yeah.
So that you can relate.
I'm around a lot of people who are like, this is not alcohol. You talk about that in NA. Don't bring that in here. And like, it's something that is
I'm going to do whatever I want to do.
It's mind altering. If it helps you, it helps me.
Yeah.
I don't care.
Yeah. I'm the same. Yeah. Yeah. That's, and I like that you use the old crotchety voice for the, that was the old timer, right? AA is the only way. Yeah.
This old timer is so crotchety that like he starts speaking. He's like, he warms up and he'll clear his throat and the whole room goes around him. And it's the whole room doing that, making fun of him lovingly. I love the old timer. I don't always like some of the old timers' firmness and rigidity. I want to be a geezer and an old timer someday. I don't want to be rigid.
Yeah. We need to grow and evolve. I think there's a lot of room for growth in the 12-step programs, but I understand the protectiveness and the defensiveness over the process. I get it. I know that a lot of people die, and, we witness a lot of that. They told me when I first got sober that if I stuck around long enough, I'd go to a lot of funerals. That was absolutely my experience over the last 28 years. I've been to more funerals than I care to recall, but so I think that's where the defensiveness and the protectiveness comes from. But I get it, but it's not. We need to grow and evolve, and things need to change for sure.
This is where I am open-minded and have an open heart. That some of these old timers, this one old timer I'm imitating, he literally fell into the ER, bleeding from his ears, bleeding from his eyes, bleeding from his mouth. And when you have that where you're almost dead, and when he woke up from his coma, he was blind, and he slowly got his vision back. So when you come back from that low, you're going to hold on to the program like a life raft, and don't ever change this life raft. It's perfect, and it saved me. And if it was any different, I would have drowned. And so if you think from that mindset, you can understand the rigidity.
Yeah, I go, oh, okay, that's how it was for you. That is definitely not my experience, but yeah, that's I get it. But I wish that people in AA would be a little more, open-minded about the fact that there are multiple ways to get sober.
Why did we change the preamble?
Look, I get like not wanting to change the first 164, and I like that new stories are being added. And I mean, it would be nice if it was a little more gender neutral, but
there are sections I wouldn't change. I would add an updated doctor's opinion with the old one, sort of like having a cancer manual.
That'd be a great idea. Yeah.
Sound like you would not have a cancer manual relying on a doctor's opinion of cancer from 1939.
Yeah.
You might look at that and then compare it to now today. This is what we think.
Yeah.
I think there's some opportunity to like the family afterwards and to wives.
Oh, for fuck's sake. A chapter to the wives. How condescending is that?
Yeah. Well, they even have a footnote that says, well, mostly men were alcoholics.
I know back then. Yeah.
So the fact that they have to explain it tells me, what do we need to do to open this up?
Yeah. Who do I got to talk to?
Yeah.
What do we got to do?
And I'm sure there are big book thumpers listening to this now whose heads are exploding all over their car.
They're like, unsubscribe.
Unsubscribe. Both of these I'm not trying his podcast, and I'm not listening to this one anymore.
And never again.
Right.
Love you too.
But I'm of the opinion of we need to be more inclusive.
Yeah. I get that. We are at our time. I could obviously talk to you forever about all this stuff.
This went by so fast.
I know, we'll have to do another round. Maybe you'll be like a regular, like on Recovered. Mark S has that podcast, Recovered, that you're a regular on.
He is who I found when I first got sober. I couldn't find anything but his podcast. And it's like the first thing I ever found. So
that's awesome.
He's become a great friend since March 21st, 2014. So I just got 8 years.
That's amazing.
And I feel like a new person.
Yeah, you are a new person. Somebody
told me you're a newcomer until 10 years.
That's bullshit. I have 28. What I say go. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, you're higher in the priority than me.
Listen, the longer I'm sober, the more I realize, the less I know. I don't know. I really have come to the conclusion. I don't know what's right for anybody. And I've come all full circle to, I'm just tuning into what works for me, and I'll share what works for me. And if it works for you too, awesome. If not, I'm a curator of information, and I think a lot of us are curators. It's like, oh, I know lots of people who could maybe talk to you. So that's kind of
nobody
where I'm coming from too.
Has done the 12 steps perfectly, including Bill. Because we're human beings. It's only a journey. There's
no such thing. Well, I really enjoyed our conversation.
Me too.
I enjoyed our conversation on your podcast too. That was so much fun. And thank you for the work that you're doing. And you're doing an amazing job. We just got to suit up and show up and leave the results up to God or whoever.
You too. This went by so fast. This was so much fun. And I needed this today.
Oh, well, listen, I really appreciate you. And I'm so glad that we're friends. It's just an amazing opportunity to connect with other people that are like-minded. So go listen to your podcast. Is there ways, how can people get a hold of you or listen to your podcast? Or if someone wants to reach out, what's the best way?
Website is soberfriendspod.com. Instagram is where I'm most active, at soberfriendspod. That is pretty much unique everywhere. I'm on Twitter. Twitter's a cesspool. So Twitter. I do like almost nothing there. It's just so awful. And anything on my personal account is all like nostalgia pro wrestling. So not even like, I just tweeted a bunch of people I know. We talk about like wrestling from the 1980s. And so it's not even recovery. So if you want to reach me, the Instagram account or email matt@soberfriendspod.com. And I love hearing from people and I respond back.
Me too. If you need a friend, you got two right here.
That's right.
Matt, thank you so much. And we'll talk real soon.
We'll talk soon.
Yay.